So we're moving through the final phase of this course, and the final thing that we're going to talk about is free shit. Taking free shit. And a great thing about chess is that a lot of the time your opponents will give you free stuff, and all you got to do is notice it and take it. So we've talked about killing the king. Extremely important. The most important thing in chess. You can't win games if you can't checkmate their king. So that's extremely important. We've talked about trapping your bitch cheating. That's very, very important too. If there's a free chance to win the queen, we can oftentimes just win on the spot. We've also talked about not leaving a man behind. Do not leave your brothers behind. Cooperate, coordinate. Alpha males lead, and we have to lead and cooperate, coordinate with our forces. Make them be the best men that they can be. That's what a true leader does. And what we're going to talk about now is free shit. And we're going to talk about winning pieces. We're going to talk about some clear-cut cases of just winning a piece, and that'll either mean trapping a piece or a double attack that wins the piece. I'm going to show examples like that. So this very first example here is from Garry Kasparov, who was world champion at the time. He was playing a simultaneous exhibition, and he was able to win this wayward knight on h5, which had nowhere to go. He just played the simple move g2 to g4. Trapped the knight, and his opponent couldn't do anything and had to resign. But it's very easy to miss that because it's a pawn push on the side of the board. We're thinking about development, and probably his opponent just totally missed it. But anyway, it's just a simple move, wins a piece. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, so one thing that I often hear when I'm coaching little kids, like I'm coaching a 7-year-old kid, they say, yay, I get to play the fork trick. There's a fork trick where you push a pawn and you fork two pieces, usually minor pieces like a bishop and knight. So in this case, there's a way to set up a fork trick, and it's exactly what these kids get all excited about. So in this position, I can play the move e5, and you'll notice that this bishop here, this bishop on f6, is trapped. It has nowhere to go. It has no free squares. That's what it means when it's trapped. So if it goes out to g5, I simply play the move f2, f4, and all of the bishop's squares are covered. The pawns are covering everything. So the execution of the fork trick comes about after bishop takes e5, so I'm setting up the fork trick. And now I play the move d4. Bang. I forked the two pieces. I'm hitting the bishop, and I'm hitting the knight. And so I win a piece, and there's my free shit. So there we go. With a nice simple sequence, I've set up the fork trick, I've won a piece, and I'm going to win the game. So let's go on to some cases which are a little more complicated. Okay, so one thing we're going to talk about is the value of using double attacks to win pieces. It's kind of like you're pointing a gun at two different people at the same time. And they're both going to try to scatter away, but you have a very good chance of getting one of them. And in this particular case, we're playing black. If we look around the board, it's very valuable, like I've said before, to always be aware of what undefended pieces and pawns there are for both sides. If it's your move, then thinking about it for your opponent, with regards to your opponent's pieces, is very valuable. So here, if we look around the board and we think, well, what pieces and pawns does white have what do they have that's undefended? Well, they have this knight on g6, which is not defended by anything. They have this bishop on b2, which is not defended by anything. And if you think about a double attack here, well, you might be able to play a move that attacks both of them and makes it so that they cannot both be defended. So when two pieces are attacked at once, especially if they're very awkward, and especially if you're doing it with check against their king, then they have oftentimes no way to defend both of them. And here, with one simple move, we play the move queen to b6. I'm hitting the undefended bishop on b2, and I'm hitting the knight on g6. And then I just simply scoop up the piece. And the funny thing is, you'll see stuff like this even in Grandmaster games. I mean, this example right here, I actually found it in an International Masters analysis, and it wasn't mentioned. So sometimes it kind of blows my mind, but you know what? Chess is a hard game, so even very good players can miss simple things. So it's very important to notice undefended pieces because it might just be free shit. You might just have a free piece to take. And as long as you notice it, as long as you notice these two tactical weaknesses, these two undefended pieces, boom, play queen b6, attack both of them, and you're going to win one of them. So let's go on to similar ones. Okay. So this was a very famous case. This was a case of a game with Anatoly Karpov, who was world champion. Well, this was a little bit after he was world champion, but it was in 1993, and he lost what might have been the worst loss of his career. He was playing black against the American Larry Christensen, and he had two undefended pieces. He had an undefended knight on h5 and an undefended bishop on d6. And when you see these two undefended pieces, it's important to think, well, they have these two undefended pieces. They're both liabilities. Do I have one move that I can play that will attack both of them? Like in the previous example, the best piece to do that with is usually a queen, because our bad bitch can move in all directions infinitely. So in this particular case, do you see a way to move your queen to attack both of those pieces? The undefended bishop right here on d6 and the undefended knight on h5. Well, we have the nice simple move, queen to d1. We play this move and we have a double attack. This is undefended and this is undefended. They cannot both be defended, so white wins a piece. This was probably the most shocking loss that Anatoly Karpov ever had. And it was all based on just not noticing an undefended piece. That both undefended pieces couldn't be covered after one single retreating move. So retreating moves are sometimes hard to find because we want to move forward. But if we notice weaknesses in their camp, we might be able to catch them off guard, like an example like this one. So let's go on to the next one. Okay, so actually this was a fun one where I was black and I was playing a player who became a grandmaster shortly after this, and I actually trapped one of his pieces. I trapped his knight on e5 is undefended, and I just played the move queen to g5, and I think my opponent was totally stunned. Take a look at their knight right here. It turns out that if you look at all the squares for the knight, it has nowhere to go. It has no place to go. So my opponent was just totally shocked by my move, queen to g5, and if they go queen to d4, I can go c5. They would move their queen to d4 to try to defend the knight. But I push my pawn up to c5, supported by my knight on e4, and their queen has to move away, and then I just gobble up the knight. So sometimes pieces can just get trapped right in the middle of the board in very unexpected ways. So we have to watch out for them. We have to look for those opportunities. I mean, if we just play good sound strategy and we catch all of these free opportunities that our opponents give us to checkmate them, to trap their queen, to take free shit, we're going to do really well. So it's very important to notice these things and to be as active as possible as we can while catching all of these weaknesses, all these errors, all this free stuff that they're going to give us. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, I'm going to show an opening trap here. So you can ignore the opening moves. You know, sometimes this is called the Caro-Kann defense. Not that it's very important to mention that, but you know, basically black is staking a claim in the center. I'm playing d5 and e5. They go knight to f3, attacking my e5 pawn, and I have a nice trick. I play the move knight to f6, and now some people fall for this trap of knight takes e5. And there's a really cool thing to pay attention to here, which is all based on a double attack. And like I said before, double attacks that involve attacking the king and a piece that cannot block the check are very, very powerful. So in this case, what we can do is we can play the move d4. What this does is it opens up an avenue for us to go queen a5 check, hitting the king while also, so I'm hitting the king diagonally with my queen while hitting the knight from the side. So I'm hitting the knight on e5 as well. So I'm hitting it horizontally while I'm checking diagonally. So the knight moves, and now we win our free shit with queen a5 check. Queen a5 check, and here we just scoop it right up. Boom, boom, and there we go. Let's say they play this. I just take it. So let me show that again, just so you can see how it works out. So I play the move d4 so that I get the knight to move away from the diagonal. And I notice that this piece is undefended, and I have the check against their king. So this is a case of just using a double attack against their king and against their knight to win a free piece. So very simple, but very powerful. It's very important to spot these checks that win free pieces, because we may just be able to win a bunch of games just spotting a check, boom, win our free piece. All right, let's go on to the next one. Okay, here's an example of the exact same idea. This was actually played in the World Rapid Championship a few years ago, and a very strong grandmaster with white, I think, miscalculated and just missed that leading up to this position, black could just play the move queen to a5 check with the exact same pattern, exact same motive. And that's why it's so good to see these examples, because you're going to see it again and again and again. When you're playing, you're probably going to see examples like this with queen a5 check and having a knight hanging there. Or with colors reversed, maybe you'll have the opposite. Maybe you'll have a white queen checking on a4 to pick off an undefended knight on e4. So these things come up quite a bit. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, so in this position, black just had his rook attacked with the blunder, bishop to a3. And like I like to talk about with undefended pieces, the bishop is undefended there. And what we're able to do here, it's very, very easy to miss a move that captures a piece long range. And so we play the move queen to f3 check, and we're hitting the king, and we're also hitting the undefended bishop on a3 across the board. And because it's long range, a lot of people have trouble with the vision aspect of it. But again, it's one of those things, if you see a bunch of examples of it, it just gets way easier to find again and again. So as long as we see more and more examples of this type of thing, it just gets much easier to find. So we simply play the check on f3, and we get to scoop up our free piece. They go here. Thanks for the free piece, bro. So there we go. A check, and we win the free piece. So I'm going to show a few more examples like this. All right, yeah, here's one that's really, really easy to miss. Extremely easy to miss. You'll see, again, let's talk about undefended pieces. This is undefended, this is undefended. Notice the rooks in the corner are undefended, but they can't be attacked. But they have this knight on a4 that's undefended. It's kind of in no man's land over there. But notice that we have a check available. Notice their king is vulnerable to a check. We can check on h4, hitting the king, and also, sorry, I'm just going to remove these arrows here, just so it's, remove these circles so it's not as confusing. But we can just target this knight all the way across the board, and the double attack will just win us a full piece. So these types of moves are so important, and to be totally honest with you, I've fallen for this so many times. I've fallen for these types of checks in blitz games when I was kind of, like 500, 600 points lower rated. I fell for these things. I fell for something like this in a tournament game against a master. It's so easy to fall for because you're looking at something diagonally, but it's also occurring horizontally too. So, the queen is using its double attacking power to win material here. So they just scoop it right up and they win the piece. So this type of stuff is so easy to miss, but if you capture opportunities to win free pieces, you're going to be winning a lot of free pieces and a lot of games. So let's go on to the next one. All right, next one here. Here's a nice one. We have a black pawn up here on b3, and we're trying to get an attack going. Let me count the pawns. 2, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 minor pieces, 2 minor pieces, 2 rooks. Okay, so it's equal material. And let's look at what undefended pieces are there for white. This is undefended, and this b7 bishop is undefended. Well, I have 2 checks. I have the check on a2, and I have the check on c2. But one thing that's nice about the check on c2 is I can decoy the king, and then I can play a double attack, checking the king and winning the bishop on b7. So let's look at that. Take, take. So I've lured the king out into the open so that I have a check available, so I get my double attack on the king and on the bishop. And notice that the bishop can't block and there's nothing that white can do. So I just simply scoop up the bishop and black has won a full piece. Let's look at that again. You see, I created the conditions for my own tactic by luring the king out into the open and then executing my double attack and simply gobbling up my piece. So, it might look advanced, but really the whole idea was to lure the king out into the open, get my double check, attack the undefended bishop while also attacking the king. So not actually that difficult when you break it down. Okay, so what's the next one? Let's see. Okay, so this is the most complicated version of all of these that I have. And the reason why is because it's the hardest to see. Because if we look at what's undefended for white, the rook on b1 is undefended. But it looks like we can't attack it, right? Because the queen is covering everything here. We don't have any checks. But we have a way to tactically create a situation where we can make use of it. If we play the move rook takes f2 first, queen takes f2, now you see the rook is kind of opening up to a queen e4 check if we could get rid of this. If we could get rid of this pawn on c4, we'd have a juicy check on e4. So we play the brutal rook takes d5, capturing the bishop, and now if the pawn moves, we get to play queen e4 check and gobble up that rook when we're up a piece. So it's a very nice case of we play a small sacrifice, capturing the bishop with our rook, and then we have opened things up that basically we originally wanted to try to find a way to take advantage of that undefended rook. And the queen was attacking e4 through x-ray, but we decoyed everything. Notice the queen, in this position, the queen is covering everything. The bishop's covering everything. Capture, capture. And now, when we take on d5, we open everything up, we play queen to e4 check, and now we get to scoop up the rook, and we have just won a full piece. So a very valuable tactic to be aware of, and this stuff occurs all the time. A diagonal double attack on two different pieces. It's so common. So often we have a rook in the corner, we forget about it. They check and they gobble it up. In this case, the rook on b1 was undefended, so it was a tactical vulnerability, a tactical weakness, and I was looking for a way to make use of it or exploit it, and fortunately there was a great way to do that. Take, 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 and now queen e4 check, and I win the rook. So this is the most advanced version of this kind of tactic that I wanted to show. But I think when you see it executed, you can understand how it makes sense and how you could find something like this yourself. All right, let's go on here. Okay, so here again, we'll see the value of a double attack. I'm looking at undefended pieces. This is undefended, but they're very far away. The bishop on c5 is undefended. And what you'll notice here is that if white takes on c6, takes the knight, I'm threatening to checkmate their king with queen to d8. So I actually can just play this move. Knight takes c6, and let me illustrate. If they play bishop takes e3, we have a knight and queen mate with queen to d8 mate. You see everything is covered. Our queen is attacking the king on e8, covering all the squares, so the king has nowhere to go. So we have two threats with this move. With this move, we threaten checkmate in one move, and we threaten the undefended bishop on c5. So it's just a very nice, simple combination that has two threats. And the thing is, because the two threats are so brutal and need to be addressed immediately, we're going to win a piece. The checkmate has to be addressed right away. So they take back, and now we simply take our free piece. So because our threat was so pressing and so brutal, they had to react to it right away. Boom, there's our free piece. So the undefended bishop on c5 was a weakness, and it was something that we were able to take advantage of. And so we took advantage of it quite nicely. All right, so I'm going to show an example of a desperado, which is something I briefly talked about before, but it's very important. So in this case, the rook here is attacking the queen, and our queen is also attacked. Our queen on d6 is attacked by the knight on f5. So both of the queens are attacked, and black would love to win material here. We'd love to try to win a piece, love to try to do whatever we can that would help out our position. So what we can do here is we can play the move queen takes h2. And you might wonder, what, aren't you just sacrificing your queen? Well, yes and no. I'm capturing the rook, but what I'm doing is I'm capturing a rook, and then the next move I'm planning to capture the queen. So I'm giving up my queen to win a rook and then to take the queen. So rather than just trading queen for queen or queen for a queen and knight, I'm getting the rook. And that rook is a big deal. So after they take back, now I just simply take the queen. And it works out very nicely if they capture back. Well, then I'm just going to capture their undefended rook here. So it all works out perfectly for black. So this is a desperado because we play this move that gives up our queen. It, throws it away, throws caution to the winds, but our plan is to just capture a piece on the next move. It's basically like you have a piece that's about to be captured, and you give it away under the best possible conditions, getting the most possible material you can for it before capturing what you wanted to capture before. So a little bit hard to explain it, but you know exactly what I mean. I'm just giving up the queen for the maximum amount of material, and then I'm picking off the queen, and here I'm up a piece. So that works out beautifully. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, so next one's kind of a nice one. White is able to trap the knight. We're going to show some examples of piece traps here. So the knight here is actually in no man's land. The move king c3 was played. This was a game played by Michael Adams against this grandmaster named Golod, and it's from a real tournament game. So a grandmaster with black fell for this, and after knight to a4, there's the move king to b3, and here you can see the king on b3 is covering all the squares, and the bishop is covering the rest of the squares. We call this corralling a knight. So we've basically just completely trapped the knight. We've corralled it with our bishop. With the bishop on d4 on this square right here, it controls all the squares of the knight. So that's something to think about, especially in some types of endgames. You might be able to trap the opponent's knight. I've had it happen to me before. It's not fun if your knight gets trapped and you just lose it for nothing. So that was the end of this one. White succeeded in winning the game quite nicely. All right, let's go on to the next one. Okay, next one here. This is so easy to miss. I want to emphasize how easy this is to miss. So in this game, black's rook on d3, you might think, oh, it looks safe. The rook is not going to be trapped or anything. It seems totally fine. But take a look at the squares the knights control after the move knight c5. One simple move. Take a look. Knights cover a3, b3, c3, and d3. And notice what our bishop covers. Our bishop covers, well, our pawn covers this as well, but our bishop covers the d2 square, so the rook can't even go there. So we have beautiful control of all of the squares for the rook. Of course, if they go here, we take with our king. So in an unexpected way, that piece just gets trapped. And this type of thing is so easy to miss, because especially when a piece is in the corner and it gets trapped, it's more expected. We go, oh, okay, it didn't have many squares. Of course it was going to get trapped. But here in the center of the board, we normally just assume that it has a lot of free squares, and sometimes we don't even look at traps. Sometimes we don't even think it's a possibility. But here, boom, one simple move, the rook is trapped, and white has a winning position. So simple, but so easy to miss. So we got to pay attention to those things. All right, and actually here's a fun one. This one was missed by the world champion, Magnus Carlsen. He walked into this position with a very bad rook here. And what happened was his opponent played knight to f4. Let's look at all the squares. Our knight covers all these. Our pawns cover these. And our knight covers this square, and our pawn covers this. So the only safe square is here. But now G5, and guess what? The rook is trapped. Notice again how the knights are controlling a ton of squares. They're controlling all the squares right here. So even the world champion had his rook trapped. So pretty amazing case. G5, and then gobble gobble, and white has just won a rook for the knight, which is close to a 2-pawn gain for white. So really interesting how the rook gets trapped here. I'm showing you some examples like this because I'm sure they're going to come up in your games, and I'm sure they're going to be shocking. Someone's going to be like, what? My piece just got trapped? Well, that's what we got to pay attention to. So piece is trapped, and Carlsen lost pretty easily after this. Let's go on to the next one. And this is mostly just to get you aware that this type of thing is even a thing. A lot of people don't even know that this is even a thing in chess. So let me show you another fun one. Knight to h6. So, white has some serious attacking potential on the king side with all the pieces over here. And black goes rook to g7 to try to keep the rook nearby and try to keep it near the king. And take a look. Knight to h5. And in this position, take a look again at the squares the knights control. f7 from this knight on h6. g8 controlled by the knight. G7 controlled by the knight on h5, and our queen's controlling everything here. And our bishop on c2 is controlling the g6 square. So in a previous example, the bishop on g5 was controlling squares. And here you can see our knights and our bishop on c2 control the squares for the black rook, and white again traps the rook and wins at least that 2-pawn advantage of knight for rook. So so quite nice that we're winning the rook here with the knight. And okay, the game continued for a few extra moves, but that's not really relevant to what we're discussing here. So that was a nice case of trapping a rook. And here we have some other fun cases. So I want to show this one here. This one's a fun one. The rook on f4, again, because our rook is close to the center, things probably seem safe. Well, we have a simple move that just flat out wins the rook. Now black played the move g5. And again, these moves are so easy to miss because we have a tendency to not want to move pawns in front of our king because we feel like we're opening ourselves up, exposing ourselves. But here, look how the pawn covers these squares, h4 and f4. And our bishop covers the remaining squares. Our bishop on b7 is controlling everything. So the rook on f4 is trapped. So actually g5 was played, and then white simply resigned. And this was only a very fast game of chess, but still, it's a game between grandmasters, and it's good to know that even in a fast game of chess, a grandmaster can get his rook trapped just like this. So let's go on to the next one. Okay, so this one with the bishop on g4, this one's kind of harder to see. This one's not that simple at all. So the way that this one works is that black's bishops are kind of vulnerable here. The bishop on g3 doesn't have a lot of squares to go to. And the way that I take advantage of that is I play the move h5, attacking this bishop with tempo. And when the bishop moves, now I play this move, and I've actually just trapped the bishop on g3. Take a look at its squares. Where can it go? Can't go to d6. I'm controlling that. Can't go to e5. My pieces control that nicely. Can't go to f4. I just gobble it up with my queen, which is supported by my rook. So everything is very nicely covered by black, and h4 just traps the bishop. So this is a nice case, very easy to miss, nice case of winning a full piece, and just kind of emphasizes that these things can be easy to miss even for quite good players. So, if you're catching these things like this, you're going to be winning a lot of free games. So it's important to look out for those things. Look out for vulnerable pieces that can't really move. All right, and actually here's the hardest one and the final one of this course. And I'm including it partially to show that that there's a lot of value in a lot of these things I'm showing you. And this kind of trap is similar to the previous one. Basically, This was a game between Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky, played in the World Championship in 1972. And both players actually missed the idea. And that's what's so amazing about it, is that sometimes simple moves can be missed by the best players. And that's also why I want to get you to be aware of them too. Because the best move is the move g5. What you'll notice here is look at the bishop's squares. Where can it go? Well, it has this square to go to, or this square. All the other squares are controlled by black's pieces. So if they go up here, well, then I'm just going to play g4. And what I'm doing is I'm removing the defender of the e5 bishop. So with this g4 move, I'm winning on the spot. So that's a very important point to notice, that I have g5 to g4. And so the bishop goes back to g3, and now what I play here is I play h5. And just like in the previous example, I have h4, and amazingly, the bishop doesn't have anywhere safe to go. Take a look at the bishop's path. It has no safe place to go, and this is so surprising. Sometimes simple moves in chess are just surprising. And this is so surprising that the world champion, well, Boris Spassky was world champion at the time, but the world champion who was playing black didn't even see it. And the challenger who was playing white also didn't see it. So a quite amazing case. They have to try to give their bishop some breathing room, but here I can bring my rook over, and now I'm threatening to take the bishop now, and then I'm threatening to bring my pieces in and just gobble things up. So here I have a really brutal and nasty attack by exposing their king, and then again playing the move g4, and everything opens up and explodes, and white's king is in very big trouble. But the thing I wanted to show you here is just even being aware that this bishop could be vulnerable. I think most people wouldn't even think of this. Most people wouldn't think of this bishop on f4 as something that's vulnerable or something that could be a weakness. But pay attention. We play g5 and we go h5, and suddenly you may notice, uh-oh, that bishop doesn't have a lot of places to go. I mean, like if they move the rook over, we play h4. Uh-oh, where does it go? Suddenly the bishop has only one place to go, and we go g4, and yeah, we remove the defender. We remove the defender of the bishop. Only the knight's defending it. Once the knight moves away, we just gobble that bishop right up. So very important to pay attention to all these nice opportunities to get free pieces. So pay attention to abilities of your pieces to trap the opponent's pieces, sometimes with pawns, sometimes with a fork trick. Pay attention to double attacks against undefended pieces, or against a king and an undefended piece that's somewhere else on the board that you might be able to scoop up. So when you notice all of these weaknesses, you'll be able to kind of exploit more than one at once, and sometimes you'll just be able to win a game with one or two great moves. So these tools are the main kind of basis for the tools that led to me improving a lot as an adult player, just kind of getting these things hard, fast, and down. And I think if you pay close attention to these, if you watch this video a few times, you see these examples a couple times, you think about them, you'll be able to apply them yourself, and probably in almost no time, you'll be able to beat basically everyone you know at chess. This has been International Master Eric Kislik, and I hope you've enjoyed my course.